Hello, this is National Master All Rats here to continue my series on how to play the openings, and today I'm going to use the AlekhinesDefense. And a quick disclaimer here: Alekhine, Alekhine, neither one is the correct pronunciation. I've heard it, I can't remember it, but I want to say something about pronunciations of interesting names and cities. I believe it's correct just to use the American version of the name, and there's a precedent for it. For instance, we in America call the capital of France Paris, but if you talk to a Frenchman, his city is called Paris. And if you talk to somebody from an Hispanic nation, they're going to pronounce that city as Paris, and I'm not going to go into all the other cities. But anyway, if you know what I'm talking about, that's what counts. I don't mean any disrespect to any person or city or country or anybody. It's just much easier for me to know. I've heard so many different pronunciations of the names. I usually use what's easiest, and as long as you know what I'm talking about, that's great. If you're one of those people that can remember the name of every pronunciation of every name and city, that's great. I can't do it. So anyway, Alekhines or AlekhinesDefense, you know what I'm talking about it. Okay, it's a fighting defense employed by black. A couple strong players in America, grandmasters Lev Albert and Hikaru Nakamura, are known to have used it. And I'm not going to go great into depth about all the sidelines, but I'm going to introduce them. The purpose of this is to, if you want to play the AlekhinesDefense, this will give you some foundation. But this video is actually more for the white player who's trying to find out a way to play against it. We're trying to give him something playable that he can learn, and I'm going to recommend a number of side variations that will break all of black's preparation and let white play something he's comfortable with. And then as white gets more comfortable playing against this opening, white can start investigating some of the main lines. Okay, the most common move to play is e5, and it's correct for black to play the knight to e4. I think if you go to or d5, if you go to e4, you might drop it. Okay, there's basically, let me show you just a few ideas here. One is white starts sending his pawns forward. He wants to gain some territory at the expense of black's pieces. And this line I'm going to show you right here is called the four-pawn attack. And the objective here for white is that white wants to seize a lot of space and get his pieces developed and then try to overwhelm black with his space. But it's not that easy because black's ahead in development. White has no pieces developed. Now, I've used this. I have a sample game I'll show from early in my chess career. And we'll talk more about this when we get to that later. But I don't recommend this if you're just learning to play against this opening, simply because you're not developing your pieces. And notice that both white's bishops' mobilities have been reduced, and black will be attempting to exploit these advanced pawns in some way, shape, or form. Maybe try to win this c4 pawn by getting this bishop off the diagonal somehow, or breaking into the white center somehow with moves like c5. You know, he'll have an e6 played in here and break up that whole white center. So it's complicated there, and I think you're better learning some of the other lines, but I wanted to make you aware of what one of the main lines is. Now, white has some divergences here. Let's back it up. Okay, what white can play in this position is to take this pawn, and black has two replies. He can take with the e-pawn, and in this case, what white just needs to do is develop his pieces. Okay, develop your pieces and play chess. Just bring the knight out to f3, and black may have some play with bishop g4 and trying to undermine somehow these pawns. Yeah, black has to be careful. I just follow the arrows. I think it's quicker. Knight f3, bishop g4, bishop e2, bishop takes f3, bishop takes f3. This pawn hangs, but there's a tactic to get it back or to win the piece. So black has to be a little careful, but black can also be undermining the white center in other ways. You can be counterattacking with knight c6 at some point, putting some pressure. So white might just opt for a move like bishop d3 and then opt to bring the knight to e2 and avoid a lot of these problems. So it's something for you to be thinking about if you decide to play this line. But black doesn't have to take with the e-pawn. Black could take with the c-pawn. And similar things happen, but in this case, usually what black will do is fianchetto this dark squared bishop and have some pressure on the d4 square. And in this case, you both just develop your pieces and play chess. And whatever you think are the most best squares for your pieces, find them, get them out. Okay, so that's one way to play this. Now let me back it up slightly. Show you another line. Another line is to play what they call the two-pawn attack. See, white's attack with 2 pawns. Now the knight comes able to come back to d5, and now white plays knight c3. And if black takes, and we'll look at when he doesn't, white should be taking back with the c pawn. Now notice here, even though white has a double pawn, it'll probably get exchanged on d6 shortly, but white has open lines for both of his bishops that he didn't have in the 4-pawn attack, and white will soon be getting developed. Notice that black has only moved his knight so far, nothing else has moved. But black's going to get his pieces out here in a minute. But you just play chess. So this is a pretty simple system to learn. The alternative is black can defend. Now if white wants, he can take the knight, or you can just start working on your development. Either one is fine, and you follow through and develop your pieces. Okay, white might end up with an isolated d pawn. Black might have a. Well, here I'll show you what I mean. This just nothing's forced, but you see here, if he takes with the queen in order to take back, so that white can't take and re-isolate this, but this game is pretty even. Look, the game is very symmetrical. If white plays bishop d3, suddenly white's lost a tempo. How did this happen? So you got to be careful about this. This suggests that black has full equality, and you're playing a game of chess. So, and also by taking on, allowing black to take back on d5 with his pawn, you've activated a bishop that was otherwise shut in. So these are just some ideas real quick. Let's back it up just a little bit and discuss some other ideas. Another idea is just simply to play the d4 and let the knight sit there. And then on d6, white has a couple interesting choices. He can play knight f3, then the main line is bishop g4. White allows a knight to stay on d5, and white will just continue with his development. And another idea is to play f4 in this position. And I've played a few games here and there where if they take here, I take back with the d pawn, and it gets a little tricky, but white should be fine. I think knight b4, you eliminate black's castling privileges, and then you're able to play knight a3, and white should come out of this okay. Anyway, let's back it up a little bit and see what else we need to cover on the main line. Okay, so e5, knight d5, so we've covered the d4, the c4 moves. Another idea is just to play bishop c4. This develops the piece, and now you bring it back to b3, and you've got some pressure on e6, but it's not gonna, or I mean on f7, but black will be playing e6 at some point, and that pressure goes. This is another choice, and all these are going to lead to an equal game, but that's what's going to happen in chess openings. You're going to get an equal game. What you need to know is how to play that game, and I've just shown ideas. Just develop your pieces, get them out, get them working, find ways to get them working together, and play a game of chess, and you'll learn from playing these openings. Okay, so let's talk about some side variations. Okay, I have a game that I'll explain my rationale for the choice a little more when I get to it, but I can say some of it now. Knight c3 is an interesting move right now. The main idea is that if black takes the knight, white will take back with the d pawn, and once again white has free development for his bishops, and even though the game is relatively even, white's going to get developed a little bit quicker and have a comfortable game that black can't seize any advantage from. And I made a choice to use this in one of the illustrative games I'll show you. So let's look at a little bit too and see what other ideas does white have. Well, one is to just play knight c3 in this position. To defend the pawn. Now it has some interesting, there's a lot of interesting transpositional possibilities. In other words, you start with one opening and end up in another. Black could play e5 and you're in a Vienna game, or you can maybe even go into a four knights game. Okay, White can play. Whoop, let's get this e5 move back. White can even play what they call the Vienna Gambit. Now I'll show some of these lines a little later, but I'm just making you aware of what they are now. So if you want to work ahead and prepare for some of these things, you'll be aware of what possibilities you have. Because maybe you like this knight c3 move, but I want to show you a couple other things Black can do. Black could play d6. And the objective here is to go into the Pirc defense. Some people call it the Pirc defense. I don't know what it is. Pirc for me, P-I-R-C. Okay, now you go into the Pirc defense, and White can play knight f3, go for the Austrian attack, all kinds of different lines that are kind of beyond the scope of this video, but again, another transpositional possibility. Another move Black can play is kind of interesting is d5. Now White can take the pawn. Here, I'll just show you. You can take the pawn and then opt for development, play d4, and it takes on some characteristics similar to the Scandinavian defense or center counter defense. Here, White's got open lines. He'll develop his pieces. Even if he has double pawns, that shouldn't be a problem. Black won't be able to exploit them in the opening or middle game. And, you know, you just sit down and play chess. Okay. White doesn't have to take on d5. White has some other interesting ideas. One is to play d4 here. Now, this gets even more transpositional possibilities. Black could play d takes e4, and suddenly we're in what we call the Black-Mardimer Gambit. And the objective here is White sacrificing a pawn to get open lines in development, and the position is somewhat unclear. I've seen a lot of Black players just fall to pieces real quick because they don't get developed. And if Black doesn't develop, he's in a lot of trouble. So if you like to attack, this Black-Mardimer Gambit may be just for you. Okay, there's some other possibilities here. Let's just back it up. Black doesn't have to take that pawn. What if he plays e6? Suddenly you're in the French defense. White can play bishop g5, and Black has the choice of the classical system, or what do they call it? The I know what it McCutcheon variation. Okay, and or Black can even opt for the I think it's the Mises variation. You take this pawn, and eventually there'll be some exchanges perhaps on f6, and eventually Black will fianchetto this bishop and castle, and you have a pretty even game. There were some examples, a lot of examples of this opening in a match between Siegbert Terrasch and Jacques Mises back in the late 1800s. Those are available if you look for them hard enough. They're online, okay, if you're interested in this system. So you can see that there's a lot of transpositional possibilities out of this opening, and maybe one of them is just for you. And of course, White has one other choice here too. Let's see, on d5, White can opt to push, okay, and then if here you take and he takes, and you know, you can grab this and you get this with check. And let's see, game is basically relatively even. Do you like this kind of style? B2's under heat. Black has an isolated H pawn. White's pawn structure is slightly better. Maybe you like this. Go for it. Okay. So these are just some of the different sidelines you can get out of this opening. It's quite versatile. You can also play King's Indian attack style. Just play d3, and then you're going to continue with knight f3, g3, bishop g2, castles, and whatever against pretty much anything that Black sets up. So White has a lot of options other than going into the main line of the AlekhinesDefense and let Black demonstrate how well he knows his opening and play a position he's more comfortable with. So the White player can cross Black up. Even though Black should have no difficulty equalizing, Black will not be playing a position necessarily that he's extremely experienced in. Okay, so AlekhinesDefense, mostly from the White's perspective. Eventually, when I get all the other openings coming back, if there's demand for Alekhin, I'll come back and cover some more lines. But let's see. I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything. Knight c3. Okay, we covered. You know, he could play e6 too. That's another way to go into the French. You can go back into the perk. Black can also play c5. Now suddenly we're in a Sicilian defense, although it's a little iffy. See, e5 kind of, see, where's this knight going to go? Whoops! All the squares are covered, so the knight kind of has to go back, and then white just happily says, okay, I'm going to develop my pieces and have a development advantage. So some black moves are not all that good. Black could even try knight c6 here, stopping e5, and who knows what's going to happen next. Suddenly white gets this pawn center going, and black tries to combat it. D5, e5, now maybe knight e4, and this pawn on e4 may be a strength and it may be a weakness. Just again, possibilities. Okay, what I'm going to do now is show a couple games out of my tournament career. One is over 40 years old. It was maybe the 10th or 15th rated game I ever played, and it was played against so this is back September 22nd, 1972. I was still unrated. Let me load the PGN up. And this gentleman, Gordon Sollers, I'd actually known for 4 years. We'd met at another club, and his brother Ray. Gordon played about another year, got his rating up to high 1700s, and quit to finish his college education. Now he's a professor somewhere on the East Coast, I think in New Jersey. And I'm still friends with his brother Ray, who was just about a year and a half younger than I, and known these guys since way back. And I wasn't that good of a player when I was unrated. My first rating was 1465, and I actually achieved a lost game out of this. My opponent missed the win, and we'll get to it. See, I'm using the 4-pawn attack. I knew that much about it. But black's getting his pieces out. Now, one thing I don't recommend is make exchanges that help your opponent develop your pieces, but that one might have been kind of forced. And let's see. Now there's a pin on my D pawn, so I couldn't take back that way. I often delayed castling back in the old days, and a lot of times I just sought to make exchanges, and that's what's going to happen here. I'm going to be making exchanges, and the only reason I'm going to win this game is because my opponent made a blunder. So I finally castle. I often delayed castling, trying to take advantage of having that extra half move to get my pieces going. So let's see. Rook takes. Here I did the right moves. I think he just missed the win. Let me back this up so I remember it. I think the key is to play knight takes first. Okay. Now I have at some point I have to take this knight. I can take the rook first, and he can always take back with the bishop. But the point is, when I take back the knight, there's a queen exchange, and then c4 drops. So let's just look at that possibility. Rook takes, bishop takes. Now, like I say, here comes, and I've got a couple pawns loose here. I'm down a pawn, and I've got a couple pawns loose. And plus, black is threatening to play knight takes, and if rook takes, bishop c5. So black's going to win this. This just shows how black can be counterattacking that center. But he missed it. After I made my move, I saw the possibility, and maybe he'd seen it. I don't remember. We didn't talk about it after the game. I know I asked his brother the next week, and they discovered it on their own. But I saw the right move was to take back with my queen and break that pin. So now the tactic is over with. I'm going to hold on to c4. So here I just happily traded pieces. That was what I was, a piece trader. See, here they're coming off the board. Boom, just like that. And I knew to activate my king. And now my pawn's weak, so I got to move it. And hey, look, more pieces off the board. And look, more. So now we're in a king and pawn inning that should be a draw, but my opponent blunders the game. Now I'm a little ambitious with d5. But now I have the possibility of getting an outside pass pawn. And there I think him backing up was a little bit of a weak maneuver. And and my king gets some action. I'm getting ready to make a pass pawn. There it is. And here comes the critical move. You can solve these by counting. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're both 4 moves for making a queen. But what I do is I find one critical move here to make all the difference. I come back with my king to b5. The purpose being now he can't advance the pawn, and now his king must step to a square where I'm going to queen with check. And that was all the difference. I was proud of myself for finding this continuation. And you know, he moved his king because he didn't want me queen with a check, and now my king and queen are close enough to stop the pawn, and here he resigned. And I was lucky to win that. It was basically, I played well enough to get a draw, and my opponent handed it to me. Okay, next game I'll run through real quick. This has some interesting things about it. Oh, back it up. I got to the wrong, there we go. Okay. Hopefully that little preview didn't give things away. Well, he elected to play e6. And now I had lost to this gentleman about a month before another tournament, and I'd seen him play the Caro-Kann, and I had a line prepared for the Caro-Kann, which I'll show you once I get to the Caro-Kanns. You know, there's a lot to show, and I only have so much time to do these. I'm going to get them out as quick as I can. So here I made an election, and you'll see my plan. I don't think he's going to take on c3 like I wanted him to open up my diagonal, so I've got to develop on my own. I took, and here's my next intended move. It turned out it is book. I didn't know book here. I don't have to worry about knowing book. I just try to play reasonable moves, and even if I don't play the best, if I'm happy with the position, that's good enough for me. But the purpose of this move is that I'm inviting him to play c6, which takes away the best square for his knight. And that's the purpose of queen f3. And now I play d4. And he gets d6 in. Now here's a very interesting point. If you're familiar with my work, you'll know that one thing I strongly suggest is do not make exchanges that develop your opponent's pieces. Instead, make exchanges that develop your pieces or improve their position. Now, in this particular case, this position, this maxim is, I believe, is incorrect, and let me show you why. Okay, there's some tension on e5. If I play bishop f4, what this says is, okay, if you take, I take. That's great. My bishop's got a better square, and it's developed. But you see there's a flaw with bishop f4, and you have to be able to solve these over the board. And what I saw was on bishop f4, he now plays queen b6. And there's firepower going against these squares. So now, if I bring my queen over to guard both the pawns, and this is the only move to do it, now he plays this, and he's on my bishop, so if I stop to save my bishop, whoops, there goes my queen. Game over. Okay? So I saw that. Now, the other alternative is that white castles queenside here. But I rejected this because, just in some respects, black's got a tailor-made attack already going. You know, with preparation, he can be getting c5 in. Maybe pick up a tempo on a2, trying to induce a weakness in my pawns or whatever, and then start getting his pawns rolling. And I thought this just gave black a clear plan of action. And I don't like to give my opponent a lot of activity if I can. I like to keep the game under what I like to do. So I rejected developing bishop f4, and I broke my role. I made an exchange to develop my opponent's piece. Okay, so this was just a better choice. Avoids, you know, queen b6 is harmless. I can cover d4 easily enough and don't have to worry about b2. And I couldn't see a convenient way to sacrifice the pawn on b2. Okay, so now I just develop, and here my opponent, the move he plays indicates he would have played queen b6 had I gone into that other line. He's trying to exploit, I think, the position of my queen. Okay, he's pressuring d4. So I had to solve, you know, from a different square. We've been pressuring it from b6, so I kind of had to solve this position. He's trying to exploit the absence of my queen. At the right time, he'd like to play bishop g4 and give that queen some fits. Like for instance, if I guard the pawn on d4, all of a sudden bishop g4 comes in, and look at this. I'm crying. My queen's trapped. Isn't that horrible? So I was careful, but you know, these queen moves like this, often what's going to happen is you're going to be able to attack that queen with tempo. Well, I can't because my knight would do it, but my queen's in the way. So hey, what do? I get the queen out of there with check. Now he grabs, and now I'm able to play knight f3, and I'm guarding the pawn and I'm attacking the queen. So everything's fine. Now probably what my opponent should do is just bring his queen back to e7, okay? But he doesn't. He gets tricky. So now I concoct ways to sacrifice this pawn. And the analysis is kind of beyond the scope of this, but suffice it to say he's not going to be able to survive if he takes this. I can play rook g1 and knight g5, and I'm going to be messing up his pawns and getting a rook on the 7th rank, as well as all similar possibilities as you'll see in the game. So I developed a piece because you got to get your guys out, and I was wise enough to calculate that I could safely give up that pawn. Okay, so he develops a piece, and unfortunately that's the losing move. Now white has a win, and I was showing you earlier how the white queen could get in trouble. Well, the black queen can get in trouble. The black queen only has two safe squares, h4 or h5 and g2. So essentially I force him to one of them, and I calculated it all out, h3. Now a lot of people would, when they look at this, they would say, well, I can't do that. I mean, well, before we get to analyzing queen takes g2, you say, well, I can't do that because the moment he plays queen h5, when I play g4 to trap his queen, his bishop takes my pawn. Well, you have to look one move further. This is a pattern we're familiar with. We say, oh, I can't play g4. Well, you can. White can play g4 because it turns out this bishop is pinned. So it's one of those things I call a can't move. I can't do that. And just to interject briefly, I'll probably mention it in every video that I can, just to make it reinforce. A lot of times when we analyze, we stop our analysis because we assume we can't do something. We don't look that one half move further to see what might happen. And International Master Jeremy Silman of How to Reassess Your Chess authorship fame says if you can eliminate the can't moves from your thought process, you'll increase your rating 150, 200 points. Okay, so it's one of those things you got to look for. Analyze the moves you don't think you can play. Don't just stop. You have to set up a red flag in an analysis to say, anytime you say, oh, I can't do that. Oh, I can't. What's the word? Well, let's see if I can. You know, a lot of times you won't be able to, but there'll be a few times when you will, and you'll say, oh my God, look at the win I missed. So some people might not play h3 because they say, oh, I can't play g4. Well, anyway, you can. Okay, so my opponent takes this pawn, and now he's attacking my rook. Now I don't want to play rook g1 here and just give up this h-pawn. Now the move is simple. Just a quiet move, castle. And look at the black queen. It can't escape. It has no escape route. Remember, the only safe squares were g2 and h4. And h3 is now taken away because my rook guards that square. So my opponent's got a decisive material loss here. And he tried to limit the loss. And here I have the advantage of a queen for a rook and 2 pawns. I have what? I have 5 pieces. He has 6 pieces. Is that right? 1, 2, 3, 4. No, he has 5. Anyway, here I didn't make the best move. I don't recommend you do my strategy, but it fits with the way I play chess. You see, the way I play chess is to take the life out of you if I can. Strangle you, suffocate you, stop you from any kind of counterplay. As long as black has an extra rook, he's got a shot. Yeah, I have a queen versus a rook. That's a huge advantage. But right now my queen's under attack. So I played I gave back some material here. Not much in pawn count, but my friend National Master Don Cotton was here at the scene, and he said, "You're just like the cat that plays with the mouse before he kills and he eats it." And I was thinking that maybe, he didn't resign when he lost his queen. Maybe when he saw how hopeless this was, he would resign. Well, he didn't. He made me play it out. But here I've given back some wood. But before he had 5 pieces, now he has 3. I have piece for 2-pawn advantage. So I've gone from a 2-point advantage to a 1-point advantage. And but I know that this is winning, and his kingside pawns are under fire. And I've got an extra bishop. So I know that this is winning, and most of his counterplay that he might have had with an extra rook to combat the queen is gone. I don't have to worry about all those possibilities. So first thing he does is he retreats his bishop to guard his pawn. Okay, now I go attack a pawn, and now I'm going to get that bishop out of there. Now the next objective is to activate the game for my bishops. So here we go, get him going. He attacks. And attack his rook, drive it off the open file. Like I say, I want lines open up for my bishops. He finds a good move. And now he pins the pawn. So for a moment, he's going to probably win his pawn back and have 3 pawns for the piece. But even then, 3 pawns for the piece isn't enough in a position like this because I've restrained his kingside pawns. So just kind of the rest of the game goes without saying. It's pretty easy. Okay, I have 3 pawns, he has 6. So here, pawn count, he's restored material equality, but positionally black is quite lost because black can't do anything with his extra pawns. If he shoves d4, he's going to drop the pawn on c4, and the pawn on d4 will follow shortly. Now my king has a nice square. Now time to activate the rook. Now he's trying to get some kind of counterplay going on the queen side, but he's fixing a pawn on a dark square. So I take advantage of that. This has 2 purposes. It keeps his king out of b5, and it fixes the pawn on a dark square, and it'll all be decisive here in a moment. Now I go attack his pawn, and now I'm ready to start penetrating with my rook. And really, there's no hope for black here. He went into the ending hoping for something, and I calculated it all out. It's easy. I can see that he's going to start running his pawn, and I'm going to bring my bishop back into play, but I'm going to pick up a pawn with it. And here we go. And just in time. Now white has a piece for 2 pawns and an outside pass pawn, and the black pawns are totally stymied. Black loses this quickly. So now I just lose a tempo with my bishop, make his king come back away from my pawn. I shove the pawn, and now I grab that, and he grabs one, and here he decided that this game was hopeless, and black resigned. Okay, so this is the Alekhine defense in a nutshell from the white perspective, and I have plans for my next videos. I know a lot of people have made some requests what they'd like to see, and believe me, I'd love to crank out every one of them. It takes time, and I do have a method for what I want to show and why I want to show it, and in the order I show it. Simply because a lot of openings relate. Some of the strategies in one opening will come back and be useful in another opening, even from the opposite side of the board. A white strategy can become a black strategy, and vice versa. So I am happy to listen to your requests. I can't promise I'll get to yours right away, and I can't promise how in depth I'll get to, because as I say, I just showed the essential mainline Alekhines defenses, and it's a lot of preparation to learn those. I showed what they are. You can do more research on your own on them. You can try playing against them. Once again, I'll start an online tournament thematic tournament with the Alekhines defense. You'll get to play both sides of the board, so you get a feel of the game, and when that one fills up, I'll open up another one. So these things are always going to run. You can discover this thing 5 years after it was started and still be able to play it and get in a tournament where you can play this and learn the opening. And that's the whole purpose, to teach you the chess openings and expedite your learning process instead of bogging you down with multitudes of opening and analysis. We'll just show you the ideas, and you can do what will make you learn the best, play chess. I have the best study program on the market because I maximize your thinking time, and I can still show you all the concepts you need to do to advance at least up to masterhood. Okay, this one went a little longer than I wanted. It's almost 35 minutes, but that's the way they go. It'll certainly help you quite a bit. Thanks so much for your time, and I'll make another video in this series as soon as I possibly can. Take care. Bye now.